Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis will begin Yud Gimel Amud Aleph 2 lines from the bottom. Ton Rabbanon v'hayu shelo yikra l'mafreya. It's the way it has to be in this way, in this order. You can't read it out of sequence. Hadvorim al levavecha yachol teya kol parsha tzricha kavana. You might think you need kavana for the entire parsha. When you're reciting Krishma, you need kavana for the entire parsha. You have to read, understand the words, what you're saying, the idea of what you're saying. You might think you need it for the whole parsha. Talmud loimar ha'ela. Ad kan tzricha kavana mikan ve'elach ein tzricha kavana diver v'lezer. Rabbi Elazar says, no, you only need till this point. This is where you need the kavana. It's only on this until this portion. Ha'ela ad kan tzricha kavana. There's machlokes Rashi and Taisus. This is the first two psukim of the first parasha, or the first three psukim of the first parasha. But only until that point do you need kavana. That's the sheet of Rabbi Elazar. Amalei Rabbi Kiva. What do you mean? Harei loimer asher anochi mitzavcha hayim al levavecha. Mikanato lama shekola parsha kola tzricha kavana. It says asher anochi mitzavcha hayim al levavecha. That teaches you the entire first parasha needs kavana. What's pshat? How do we learn out from here? So Taisus explains as follows. Because the pasuk says, it doesn't say asher tzivisicha, which is in the past, meaning what until that point you need kavana from the beginning of the parsha till this point. It says asher anochi mitzavcha, the future, meaning even further you need kavana. Not only what was read, the psukim prior to that need kavana, but it's in the future, asher anochi mitzavcha, even the psukim that are forthcoming, the following psukim also need kavana. Well, if that's the case, why dafka the first parasha? Why not the entire Krishma? That's why we have that ha'ela, that it stops it and says there till here, meaning till the end of the first parsha. So that's the machlokes. Rabbi Kiva says no, it's the entire first parsha that needs kavana. Amar Rabba Baruchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha Rabbi Kiva. That's the halacha. The halacha is like Rabbi Kiva, that it's the entire first parsha. Some learn that he said the halacha is referring to the following. This Anya Kairas Shema Tzarech Shir Chavanas Liba. He has to be Mechavan Liba Ravacha Mishum Rabbi Yehuda Imer Kevin Shekivan Liba Beperik Rishon Shuv Einoi Tzarech. So when he said Ravacha, he said that Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, he said the Perik Rishon, and on that Amar Rabba Brachana Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha ki Ravacha v'sha'ach Sham Mishum Rabbi Yehuda, and it's referring to this that he said that's the halacha. So the first version had it that he said on what Rabbi Kiva said that's the halacha, and over here we're saying that what he said the halacha is in reference to what was said over here that Ravacha Mishum Rabbi Yehuda. This asks the question. They're saying the same thing. Rabbi Kiva and Ravacha, they're saying the exact same thing. It's kavana is required up until the end of the first parsha. So, what is enough kamina between the two girsois, or the two approaches? And secondly, what is the chilik between Rabbi Kiva and Ravacha? Are they not saying the exact same thing? So he explains that perhaps the Rabbi Kiva holds that lechatchila one should have kavana even for the second parsha, but b'diavad is yoitza for kavana the first parsha. That's Rabbi Kiva. Ravacha says that once he has kavana for the first parsha, kevin shekivan liba perik rishon shuv einoi tzarach, which implies that even lechatchila no more is required. That even lechatchila kavana is not required for the second parsha. That he should not read it out of sequence. The mitzvah's kavana is only till here. Mitzvah's kriya. But from then on, it's a mitzvah's kriya. So that implies, and we'll see in the Gemara shortly, that implies that till alavecha is only kavana, and afterwards is a mitzvah kriya. So the Gemara will discuss this. That is what Rav Zutra said. Rabbi Yoshia Imer Adkan mitzvahs kriya until alavecha has a mitzvah of reading it. Mekan ve'elach mitzvahs kavana. from there on, there's no mitzvah of kriya, there's only a mitzvah of kavanah. And the Gemara will analyze it. So going back to Rav Zutra, so he said that al levavecha till then is a mitzvah kavana, and after that is a mitzvah kriya. Ma'ishna mikan ve'elach mitzvah kriya. Why do you say if then beyond that, past that, there's a mitzvah kriya? It has to be read. You have to speak it. You have to enunciate the words. In the first parsha also it says v'dibarta bam. So therefore one has to read it. So Gemara says, "En hachinami." That's true. Now we have to now interpret what he said in a slightly different way. Hachikana. Ad kan mitzvah kavana ukriya. Until alavavecha is a mitzvah kavana, a kriya as well. Kriya and kavana. Mikan ve'elech kriya v'loy kavana. From there on, it's kriya. It has to be enunciated, but you do not have to have kavana to understand the meaning of the words. Why do you say that till there you need both? Because it says al levavecha, and it also says v'dibarta bam. Al levavecha implies kavana. V'dibarta bam is kriya. Hasam nami in the second parsha haksiv al levavchem ledaber bam. It also has both expressions. The Gemara answers hahumi boile. No, that al levavchem is not teaching you kavana. That is to teach you al levavchem. Rav Yitzchak damar v'samtem es dvar ela tzricha shtei sima keneged alev. That's a reference to the tefillin. The tefillin is opposite your heart, and the reference over there is tefillin, not the kavana for the kriya of Kriya Shema. The first parsha, where there's no reference to tefillin, is therefore referring to the kavana for Kriya Shema. So that is the first shita of the first shita that we brought down, that requires, that is mechaliket in that manner. Yeah, so that's the sheet of Rav Zutra. Omar Rav Yaishia, he said differently. Rav Yaishia ad kan mitzvah kriya, till al levavchem is a mitzvah of kriya. Mikan ve'elach mitzvah kavana. From there on is a mitzvah of kavana without kriya. So ma'ishna mikan ve'elach mitzvah kavana. Why do we say from there on it's a mitzvah kavana mishum d'chsiv al levavchem hachanami haksiv al levavecha? In the first parsha it also says al levavecha, which implies kavana hachika. Ad kan enchanam. We have to reinterpret it as well, just like we did previously. We said we also reinterpret it. Here we have to do it as well. Hachikam ad kan mitzvah kriya v'kavana. Until here is a mitzvah kriya and kavana. Mikan ve'elach kavana v'loy kriya. And chanami, you need kavanah in both. You need kavanah in both. But kriya is not required in the second parsha. Over there, you just have to think about it. You don't have to enunciate the words. Umayshna ad kan mitzvah kriya v'kavanah d'chsiv al levavech v'dibarta bam. In the first parsha, you require both, because it has both the expression of kavanah, levavecha, and speaking, enunciating v'dibarta bam hasam nami haksiv al levavchem ledaber bam. It also has both expressions from the Gemara hahu b'divrei Torah ksiv. Now that ledaber bam is referring to not enunciating the words of Kriya Shema, is for divrei Torah. Since, as Atzlach points out, since the first parsha does not talk about Torah, so it must be referring to Kriya Shema. But the second parsha talks about that limadat moisem es benechem, you're teaching your children Torah, and therefore we would say the dibur that it's referring to is referring to Torah. I hope divrei Torah ksiv ha'chikam rachmana agamiru v'naichu Torah ki hechad aligasubah. You should teach your children Torah, that they should be proficient with it and they'll know how to speak in Torah. So that is the machlokes over there about kriya and kavana, the machlokes that we have between the two shitas of Rav Zutra and Rav Aishia. Ton Rabbanan, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Ad kan tzricha kavana salev div Rav Meir. Rav Meir says that kavana is required only for the first pasuk, only for the first pasuk. Amar Rav Halacha, Rav Meir said that is the halacha. Tanya Simcha Soimer kol hamarich ve'echad marich lo yamu shnoisem. Anyone who elongates the echad Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, he lengthens the dibur of it, then Ma'arich al Yom Shloisa, his life is prolonged. But when you say Echad, you can't be marked the entire word, it will lose the understanding of the word and the meaning of the word. It means specifically Dalet, that the Dalet, Echad, the Dalet has to be elongated. However, you should not, through the course of that, you should not cut off the ches and shorten the ches. The ches should be read. Now, there's a machlokes Rashi and other Rishonim. Does it mean that the ches should be read normally? It should be cut off. It shouldn't be shortened. Or does it mean, no, you should lengthen the ches as well somewhat, but not as much as the dalet. Rav Yirmiyahu also commented Rav Chia Barava, he was sitting before Mechazia Dava Marach Tuva, he saw that he was lengthening it quite a bit. Omer Lei said to him, you don't have to stretch it out that long as you have enough time within that period to have kavana, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the melech on above and below and the four ruchas, the four sides of the world, then you don't have to lengthen it anymore. Amar of Nasan Bara Barmar Ukfa Amar Yehuda Al Levavecha B'Amida. So that implies that saying those words, you have to stand when you say those words. Frankly, Amar Al Levavecha Salkadait, I mean only those words. Ela Ema Ad Al Levavecha B'Amida. When you recite the Shema, the Parsha, until that point it has to be standing. And beyond that, you don't have to. Rav Yochanan Amar Kol Parsha Kula B'Amida. And he says, no, the whole parsha has to be standing. And therefore, since the entire first parsha needs kavana, therefore you have to be standing for the entire first parsha. So apparently it's connected to the point where you need kavana. That's where you say you stand. Where you don't need the kavana, then you don't have to stand. Now the question arises, we learned that Krishma, Beis Hill says you can recite Krishma whether you're sitting, whether you're standing, or you're reclining. So what do you mean standing? So the way the Meforshim speak out over here, what means standing means if you're walking, then you have to stop. Because if you're walking, you won't have sufficient kavanah. But if you're sitting, it doesn't mean that you have to stand up. Ton Rabbanon Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the very first pasuk, Zu Krishma Shel V'Yura Nosi. That's the entire Krishma that he said. Rabbi Yehuda Nossi was Teirasam Nos, into the level which we don't have nowadays, that he was Teirasam Nosa, that every second was being Isaac in Torah. Furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi was teaching Torah to Klal Yisrael, and the future of Torah and Klal Yisrael was dependent on him. So he was Yaitza with the Deraisa of the very first pasuk. That was what he said. He didn't say the entire Krishma. He said, I observed Rebbe and I didn't see that he said Shema, that he was Mekabel al Malchus Shemaim. Amalei Bar Pachte, the son of noble ones, Bishosh and Mavir Yara Alpana, when he places his hands over his head, and for that short period of time, Mekabel al Malchus Shemaim. Then that's when he says Shema. So the Gemara has a shayla chayzer v'goymer, ain't a chayzer v'goymer. So that's all he said. Now later on, after the drosh, after the shir, did he say the rest of it or not? Bar kapara oimer ain't a chayzer v'goymer. He did not complete it. Rabbi Shimon b'Rebbe oimer chayzer v'goymer. He did. Omer le bar kapara l'Rishim b'Rebbe bishlam l'didi damina ain't a chayzer v'goymer. According to me, that I said he did not later on recite the rest of it. Hainu de mahad Rebbe ashmaitzad isbeitzis mitzrayim. That's why he was careful to say some halacha in the shir that relates to Yitzis Mitzrayim, so that he could be makabel the mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzis Mitzrayim. Since he was not going to say the rest of the Parashat of Krishma, he was careful, therefore, to say in the drasha something related to Yitzis Mitzrayim, so he can be Yitzis the mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzis Mitzrayim. But according to you, that said later on, in any event, he finished I said all the parashiyos, so he was in any event going to be masker Yitzis Mitzrayim. Why did he have to now say in the shir something with Yitzis Mitzrayim? More answers, later on he did say something. He recited the parshas of Yetzias Mitzrayim, but it was beyond the time limit. He wanted to now be master something within the time limit that had Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. Amar Ravin Lebrei, the Rav Shmuel Bar Masa Mishmei, the Rav Omar Shema Yisrael Hashem Lakeinu Hashem Echad V'nenas B'Shina. If he said the first part Shema Yisrael and then he fell asleep, Yotze, he's Yaitze. And the way the Rishonim speak out doesn't mean he fell asleep into a deep sleep, because then he only said the first pasuk. He didn't say the rest is Shema, and there's a chiyuv. There's different opinions how much is the Raisa and how much of it is the Rabbanon, but in any event, he has a chiyuv to say it. It means that he said the first pasuk fully awake, and the rest of it he said when he was slightly dozing. He said it, but without full concentration. He's Yaitze. Amalei Rav Nachman Ladoro Avdi said to Dora his Eved, B'psuke Kama Tzara. Then be Mitzara, make sure I'm fully awake. Tzvei, more than that, like Tzara. Amalei Rav Yosef Brei the Rabba, he asked him, Avu Checha Ava Avet, what was the practice of your father? He pushed himself greatly during the first pasuk to be fully awake. But more than that, he would not mitzar himself to be fully awake. So it says a praktan, he's lying flat on his back. He should not recite Krishma flat on his back. It's not covered for Krishma. So mikrahu delay likra hamigna shabradami, that implies that he shouldn't say Krishma that way, but that he could sleep that way. He was very upset. He literally cursed the person that slept flat on his back. It was not bekavadig, and sometimes it would put a person in a matzav during the course of sleep, in a matzav of being maguneh. He said, when he's sleeping, if he tilts slightly to the side, then it's fine. But as far as Krishma, the difference between Krishma and sleeping is mikra, avagav the mitzvah, and also, even if he's tilted on his side, it's also awesome. Rav Yochanan did lie, tilted on his side, and recite Krishma, and you're telling me that even that is also by Krishma. For the Gemara, Shiny Rav Yochanan, the Baal Basar, he was exceedingly heavy, and it would have been very difficult for him to do otherwise, to get up. So therefore, for a person in that situation where it's a tircha gedayla, it's mutter, but otherwise it's also.